Please tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I would love to interact with you legends. Now to the story. I was already half regretting saying yes to meeting him before I even left my house. I don't usually go out on first dates, especially with people from dating apps, but something about his profile looked chill. He wasn't over the top with flexing, didn't have those gym mirror selfies or cringe quotes. Just regular pictures. Him sitting on a wall with a beer, one where he was walking his dog, and another at a football match. Nothing fancy, just normal. The plan was simple: meet at this weird little Italian place near the canal that I'd never been to before. I actually liked that it wasn't some chain restaurant. It looked cozy in the pictures, all dim lighting and candles on the tables, like a place you'd take someone if you were serious about them. When I got there, he was already sitting by the window, looking at the menu. At first, I thought maybe I was tripping because something felt off. He looked like his photos, but not exactly. His jaw was sharper, his haircut slightly different, and when he smiled at me, it didn't really reach his eyes. I brushed it off, though. People look different in person. Lighting, angles, filters, it happens. We started eating, and the whole time I couldn't shake this weird feeling. The way he stared at me felt heavy, like he wasn't just paying attention, he was watching. And his hands were restless. He kept drumming on the table, scratching his wrist, then stopping whenever I looked. I was trying to play it cool, but inside I felt awkward. The food came out and I thought maybe it would relax the vibe. Pasta, wine, the usual. I forced myself to laugh at some of the things he said, even though his humor was kind of dry. Halfway through, he leaned forward and started asking me about my family in this really personal way. Not in a casual, what do your parents do kind of way. More like, what's your relationship with your brother like, and do you trust him? Super specific. I tried to change the subject, but he kept circling back to it. At one point, he excused himself to the bathroom, and while he was gone, I pulled up his dating profile on my phone just to double check. That's when I noticed the small stuff. In the photos, he had a tiny scar by his eyebrow, gone the guy I was sitting with. In another photo, he had a tattoo on his wrist, also missing. My stomach dropped because suddenly I realized this wasn't the same person. My first thought was that maybe he just used old photos. But then he came back from the bathroom, and the way he looked at me, like he knew I had figured something out, made my chest tighten. He sat down slower this time, eyes fixed on me, and without even thinking, I compared him again in my head. The guy from the photos looked more relaxed, easygoing. This guy had this intensity about him, like he was trying to play a part but slipping. He started talking about random stuff, asking me if I thought siblings ever really knew each other, if people online ever showed their real selves. His words got heavier, almost like he was enjoying the way it made me uncomfortable. I just nodded and picked at my food because I didn't know what else to do. That's when it hit me. He wasn't the guy from the app at all. He was his twin. Like, his actual identical twin, but not identical enough to fool me for long. I can't even explain how my body reacted in that moment. It felt like my stomach dropped to the floor while my face was still smiling. I wanted to grab my bag and leave, but something about him kept me stuck in that seat. He leaned back, arms crossed, almost like he was testing me, waiting to see if I'd call him out. His expression had shifted into something smug, and I knew, without him saying it, that he knew I had figured it out. Dinner dragged on. I barely touched my food. He seemed amused by the silence between us, like he thrived on it. When the bill came, he pulled out cash and paid without looking at me, and for a split second I thought maybe I was overthinking everything. But then, as we stood up to leave, he leaned in close enough for me to catch the smell of his cologne, and said something under his breath that I couldn't quite hear but felt wrong. Outside, the street was quiet. The restaurant was tucked into this back alley near the canal, not many people walking by. He walked me toward the main road, and I couldn't get myself to speak. Every step felt like I was walking next to a stranger pretending to be someone I knew. When we finally reached the busier part of town, he stopped, shoved his hands in his pockets, and just stared at me for a second too long. Then he smiled in this way that looked rehearsed and said he'd see me again soon. The words weren't warm. They weren't casual. They felt like a warning. I walked away fast, my head spinning, and when I got home, I checked the app again. The real guy's profile was still there, still active, same photos. But I didn't message him. I couldn't. The idea of telling him that his brother stole his account, that his brother pretended to be him and sat across from me at dinner, felt insane. I deleted the app that night, not even because of him, but because of the way he looked at me when he realized I knew, like he was daring me to say something, like he'd been waiting for me to catch on. And the scariest part wasn't the date itself, it was that he knew where I lived. When I ordered the Uber home from the restaurant, he had stood right there when I typed in my address. He saw it. He memorized it. I've checked over my shoulder every time I walk down my street since then, and I still can't figure out which part of the night was more disturbing. The moment I realized he wasn't the guy from the photos, or the fact that he wanted me to figure it out. I wasn't even supposed to go out that night. I had homework piling up and my head was pounding, but the way she kept blowing up my phone made me feel like I'd look lame if I bailed. She seemed excited, so I told myself I'd just suck it up and go. First date, nothing crazy. She picked this trendy little spot on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it was one of those places that tried too hard with neon signs and recycled wood furniture. The kind of place people go to post pictures of cocktails more than actually eat. I didn't care either way. I was just hungry and figured I'd finally meet her in person and see if she matched her profile. The moment I walked in, she waved me over. She was already sitting down with her phone face down on the table like she was forcing herself to be present. She looked close enough to her photos, but I noticed quick that she had this way of leaning forward when I talked, like she wanted to study me instead of just hang out. Menus were there, but she pushed mine aside, saying she wanted to order for both of us. I laughed it off, thinking it was one of those quirky date things. I even told her right away about my allergy because that's just what I do when I eat out. It's not a small one either. It's bad enough that I carry an 8x pen. She nodded like she understood, so I didn't think twice. Food came out fast. 2 plates, steam rising. It smelled strong but good, like garlic and soy sauce mixed with something sweet. She told me to dig in, so I did. At first it tasted fine, just noodles and chicken, nothing suspicious. But a few bites in, something felt wrong. My throat started to scratch, then tighten. It wasn't just in my head either. I knew that feeling way too well. I dropped the fork and grabbed for my water, but swallowing got harder with each second. My chest tightened, my lips started tingling, and my brain just screamed one thing: allergy. She was staring right at me, not panicking, not surprised. Almost like she was waiting for it. That's when my stomach flipped because I realized this wasn't some accident she knew. I reached for my bag to get the ink pen, but she leaned back in her chair and just kept watching. No rush to help, no concern. She tilted her head like she was curious, like she wanted to see how far it would go. That was the moment it hit me. She did it on purpose. She ordered this. She wanted to see it happen. I jammed the EPI pen into my leg under the table. The pain was sharp, but the relief was slow, too slow. I was sweating, my hand shaking, trying not to lose it in the middle of this crowded restaurant. A couple people looked over, but nobody stepped in. I forced myself to breathe through it while she just sat there, sipping her drink like this was entertainment. After a few minutes, my throat loosened just enough to breathe without choking. I wiped my face with a napkin and looked at her, hoping she'd at least pretend to feel bad. But she didn't. Her expression wasn't guilty. It was satisfied, like I'd just proven something for her. The food sat there untouched after that. I couldn't even look at it. My body felt weak, my stomach twisted, but I stayed put because I didn't trust myself to stand without passing out. She started talking again, casual, about random topics that didn't even connect. But the way she slipped in little lines about testing limits made my skin crawl. I wanted to leave, but I couldn't figure out how without collapsing in the street. The air inside felt hot, heavy, but the idea of walking outside with her following me was worse. So I sat there until my body calmed down. She leaned closer again, elbows on the table, eyes locked on me like I was a science project she wasn't done with. When I finally stood up, she didn't move right away. She let me go first, almost like she was making me leave. Outside, the night air felt cold and sharp, cutting through the haze in my head. She followed me to the corner where the streetlights flickered, and I could feel her eyes on my back the whole time. I ordered a ride on my phone, hands still shaking, and she stayed standing a few feet away, smiling like she'd just pulled off some prank. Except it wasn't a prank. She knew exactly what she did. She wanted to watch me choke, just to see if it was real. The car pulled up, and I climbed in fast. I didn't even say goodbye. She stood there on the sidewalk, still smiling, still watching as the car pulled away. I couldn't bring myself to look back once we turned the corner. At home, I kept replaying in my head. Every detail felt sharper now. The way she ordered for me without hesitation, The way she barely blinked when I started struggling, the way her face lit up when she realized I was in real danger. It wasn't an accident. She wanted proof. I checked my phone later and saw she'd messaged me already like nothing happened. Just a simple line asking if I got home safe. I didn't reply. I deleted her number, blocked her on the app, and tossed the leftovers I'd brought home straight into the trash. But the worst part, I can't stop thinking about how calm she was. Like this wasn't her first time doing it. Like she'd done it before or planned to do it again. And the only thing I can't figure out is whether she picked me because I mentioned my allergy, or if she only swiped right in the first place because of it. I should have trusted my gut the second he said he wanted to pay. Not because I don't like when someone offers, but because he said it 3 separate times before we even got to the restaurant. Like full blown made it a point. I thought maybe he just wanted to sound generous or impress me, so I let it slide. The place wasn't even my kind of vibe. It was one of those big chain diners with way too many things on the menu. I'm talking 10 different sections with tiny pictures of every single dish, like the menu itself was designed to overwhelm you. Bright lights, sticky tables, and a line of kids screaming for milkshakes at the bar. I didn't care though. First date is a first date. Sometimes you just deal with it. He showed up in this pressed shirt that looked like he ironed it 3 times, not a single wrinkle in sight. His hair was slicked down like he was interviewing for a job, not going on a casual date. I noticed he had this little folder tucked under his arm when he slid into the booth across from me. It was the kind of thing people use to carry around resumes or important papers. He set it on the seat beside him, and for some reason I felt my stomach twist. We ordered. I kept it simple with pasta, he got steak. While we waited, he leaned forward with this big grin and started talking about how he was building something big. I thought he meant a career, or maybe he was trying to brag about a startup. But the way he locked eyes with me made it feel less like casual conversation and more like he was revving up to pitch me something. Sure enough, out came the folder. He slid a glossy flyer across the table. At first, I thought it was a gym membership or some kind of diet plan. Nope. It was covered in pictures of cars, stacks of money, and people holding up champagne glasses. Right there in bold letters, it said something about financial freedom and unlocking your future. My fork was still in my hand, but suddenly I had zero appetite. He started going on and on about how he had this opportunity that only a few people were smart enough to see. He said I looked like someone who would drive, someone who wanted more out of life. Meanwhile, I was just trying to figure out how to survive a plate of overcooked pasta without throwing up from secondhand embarrassment. It didn't stop. He pulled out another sheet, then another, layering them across the table like playing cards. Each one had little flowcharts, arrows pointing down to boxes labeled partner, mentor, residual income. The whole table looked like a conspiracy board, except instead of serial killers or missing people, it was just circles and dollar signs. I tried nodding, pretending to follow, but he must have thought my silence meant I was hooked. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice, as if the diner was filled with spies waiting to steal his $1 million idea. He started breaking down how much I could make in my first month, how many people I'd need to recruit, how easy it was to scale. He said it like he was offering me the secret code to life. The food arrived, and he barely touched his steak. He was too busy pulling out his phone, showing me photos of strangers in rented Lamborghinis, screenshots of bank accounts with 6 figures, and charts that made 0 sense. My pasta got cold while he kept pointing at his screen, jabbing his finger at imaginary numbers. I wanted to laugh, but the way he kept watching my face made it impossible. His eyes weren't friendly. They were sharp, waiting for me to slip up and say the wrong thing. He wasn't just pitching. It felt like he was testing me, like this was an exam I didn't study for. Then he took it further. He told me he'd already paid my sign-up fee. Said he wanted to invest in me because he saw potential. He actually pulled a contract out of that folder and laid it in front of me, pen and all. My hands stayed glued to my lap. The whole thing felt less like a date and more like being cornered at a shady job interview I never applied for. Other tables started glancing over because of how intense he was getting. His voice wasn't loud, but his movements were sharp, papers flapping, pen clicking, hands slicing through the air like he was preaching. I caught one waitress staring, then looking away fast. She probably thought I'd signed up for this nightmare willingly. By the time dessert was offered, I wanted nothing more than to crawl under the booth and disappear. He waved the waitress off before I could answer, saying we were too busy. Too busy? I hadn't said more than 10 words in the last hour. My plate was barely touched. His steak looked untouched, and yet he kept shuffling those stupid flyers like they were sacred texts. When the bill came, he snatched it up instantly, sliding his card in with a little flourish. He smiled like he'd just proven a point, like covering dinner made his pyramid pitch legit. The second the server left, he leaned back and asked if I was ready to change my life. My mouth felt dry. I wanted to say I needed air, but my body just froze. He walked me outside after, still talking, still pushing. The air was cold, and the neon diner sign flickered above us. I stood there hugging my jacket while he went on about the team I'd be joining, how fast I could start seeing results. Cars whizzed by, people walked past, and I felt like I was trapped in some surreal nightmare. Finally, my bus pulled up, and I climbed on without looking back. He stayed on the curb, folder tucked under his arm, smiling like the deal was already done. My stomach was twisted the whole ride at home. Later that night, he messaged me thanking me for joining the movement. He actually said he couldn't wait to have me on board. I blocked him before he could send another word, but I'll never forget the way he leaned in across that booth, eyes locked, shoving paper after paper at me like he was recruiting for some cult instead of taking me on a date. And the part that stuck with me most, he never actually cared about me being there. I wasn't a person to him. I was just another slot to fill under his name on that ridiculous flowchart.
Hey guys, really sorry to interrupt. If you're still listening, then you're enjoying the story so far. And if you are enjoying, then please hit that like button. That's all I ask of you. Thanks so much. Now back to the stories.
I wasn't even hyped for this date to begin with. It felt like one of those might as well go situations. We'd matched on an app about a week before, and the conversation was fine. Nothing special. Her replies were short, a little dry, almost like she was multitasking the entire time we chatted. Still, after a few days, she surprised me by asking if I wanted to grab food. No build-up, no flirting, just want to get dinner. I didn't have better plans that night, so I said sure. The spot we picked wasn't glamorous, just a burger joint near the train station. One of those places where the music is a little too loud, the booths are a little too sticky, but the food is greasy in the best way. A safe choice. Nothing that screamed romance, but also not a shady dive bar either. She was already there when I arrived, sitting in a corner booth. That should have been my first clue. Most people arrive a few minutes late, but she looked like she'd been waiting a while. She looked different than her pictures. Not completely unrecognizable, not catfish level, but different. The photos had her glowing makeup sharp, angles flattering. In person, she seemed older, more tired. Maybe it was just fluorescent lighting, but I caught myself doing that mental math. Is this even the same girl? I brushed it off because that's shallow, right? People look different offline. She was friendly enough, if a little intense. Talking fast, jumping from topic to topic. Asking about random things like my favorite TV shows, whether I liked dogs, if I ever traveled. She didn't let me get much in, but I figured maybe she was nervous. Some people ramble when they're uncomfortable. We ordered burgers, fries, milkshakes, the whole greasy lineup. She barely touched hers. That was the second clue. Instead of eating, she just pushed fries around her plate, occasionally nibbling at the edge of her bun. But she never stopped watching me. Not in a flirty way. In a focused way, like it was a puzzle she was working out. It got under my skin after a while. I kept telling myself not to be paranoid. Maybe she wasn't hungry. Maybe she'd eaten earlier. But the longer she sat there not eating, the more uneasy I felt. Halfway through, I excused myself to the restroom. Just a quick trip. 2, 3 minutes at most. I left my jacket in the booth, wallet inside. Who thinks twice about that on a first date? When I came back, the booth was empty. At first, I thought she'd gone to the bathroom too, but her plate was still there, barely touched. Her drink sweating on the table. My jacket gone. I froze, hand hovering over the empty seat where it should have been. For a moment, my brain refused to connect the dots. Jacket, wallet, date, gone. I looked around the restaurant, scanning faces, booths, the line at the counter. Nothing. Just strangers enjoying their food. The music thumped in my ears like it was mocking me. A server walked by and I asked, "Hey, the girl I was sitting with, did you see where she went?" The server shrugged, casual as anything. She left. That was it. No explanation. Just left. I stumbled outside, jacketless, cold air biting through my shirt. People crowded the sidewalk, Commuters, drunks, couples arm in arm. I scanned every face searching for her. Every woman with a bag, every shadow slipping into a car. But she was gone, like she never existed. Back inside, I slid into the booth again, staring at the abandoned plate across from me. Her untouched fries, a cold burger, the empty spot where my jacket had been. I checked under the table behind the booth, even the floor near the counter, desperate for any chance I'd just misplaced it. Nothing. The more I replayed the night in my head, the more it felt staged. The way she barely ate. The way she kept glancing at the door like she was timing something. The way she'd steered me into sitting with my jacket beside her, not tucked against me. I told the staff what happened, but they couldn't do much. One of them even said, "Happens sometimes." That stung more than the theft itself. Like it was just another idiot who fell for the oldest trick in the book. I pulled out my phone. Thank God I kept it in my pocket and started canceling cards right there in the booth. My hand shook, not from anger, but from adrenaline and embarrassment. People around me were laughing, eating, living their lives, while I sat hunched over my melting milkshake, canceling my bank account because some stranger had just played me like a fool. The walk home was brutal. No jacket, cold wind cutting through my shirt, empty pockets. Every time a stranger brushed past me, I wondered if they knew. If maybe they'd seen her running down the street with my stuff. If maybe she wasn't alone. If someone had been waiting outside of the car, ready to peel off the second she stepped out. Back at my apartment, I checked the app. Her profile was gone. Deleted. No photos, no name, no trace. Like she'd never existed. That's when it really sank in. This wasn't an impulsive thing. She hadn't panicked. She hadn't bolted out of nerves. It was planned. She never wanted a date. She wanted a wallet, a free jacket, a quick score. The details kept replaying in my head like a bad movie. The untouched food. The restless glances at the door. The way she smiled without her eyes. All the signs were there. I ignored them because I didn't want to seem paranoid. And the part that gets me, even now, she didn't hesitate. 2 minutes in the bathroom and she made her move. Quick, clean, practiced. Jacket, wallet out the door. Gone before I even washed my hands. I didn't tell anyone for a while. Too embarrassing. Who wants to admit they got conned on a date? But it happened. I can still picture her across from me, fries, untouched, already planning how she'd disappear the second I stood up. That night didn't teach me anything profound about life or trust, just that people can switch on you faster than you think. 1 minute you're splitting fries, the next you're standing outside a burger joint in the cold with nothing in your pockets but shame. And the weirdest part, I don't even remember her name anymore. I knew something was off the second we got to this place, but I didn't have a name for it yet. The night had been fine, almost boring. Dinner, small talk, the usual fake laughs you pull out on a first date so it doesn't feel like a total waste of time. He wasn't awful, but he wasn't amazing either, just average. And he suggested a nightcap. I hesitated but agreed. His place wasn't far, and I figured one drink before calling an Uber wouldn't kill me. The building was one of those half-renovated blocks where the hallways smell like old carpet and fresh paint at the same time. He fumbled with his keys like he'd never unlocked his own door before. When we stepped in, the lights were dim, and there was already a glass sitting on the coffee table. Not his. It had lipstick on the rim. Before I could process it, someone walked out of the hallway. A woman, hair tied back, oversized hoodie, barefoot. She looked at me first, then at him. He didn't flinch. He just introduced her like this was normal, called her his roommate. I forced a smile, but my brain was racing. The vibe wasn't giving roommate. She didn't nod, didn't wave, didn't even fake politeness. She just sat down on the arm of the couch, arms crossed, eyes never leaving him. He poured drinks like nothing was weird. I sat at the edge of the couch, glass in hand, pretending to sip while watching the two of them. She didn't move. She didn't blink, and the silence stretched so long it felt like the room was shrinking. Then little things started clicking. There were framed photos on the shelf, him with her at the beach, her in his arms, both smiling. Shoes by the door, all women's. A jacket on the hook that matched the hoodie she was wearing. This wasn't his roommate. This was his girlfriend. My stomach twisted. He sat down between us, casual, like he could play both sides without either one of us caring. He cracked jokes, talked about work, while she stayed silent, burning holes through him with her stare. I wanted to leave, but something about the tension glued me to the spot. Like if I moved too fast, I'd set off an explosion. The girlfriend finally spoke, asking him about something they had planned. He brushed it off, changed the subject, turned back to me like she wasn't even there. That's when it got worse. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, and just stared at me. Not at my outfit, not at my drink, at me. Her jaw was tight, and her eyes felt heavy, like she was trying to figure out why I was sitting on her couch. I kept glancing at the door, planning how fast I could grab my bag and get out. But every time I shifted, he'd start another story, forcing me to stay locked in. He wasn't clueless. He knew exactly what he was doing. After a while, she stood up and disappeared into the back room. He laughed it off, said she was dramatic. Dramatic, like she wasn't his actual girlfriend catching him on a date in a shared apartment. The sound of drawers opening and slamming shut echoed from the bedroom. My chest tightened. This wasn't just awkward anymore. It was dangerous. I could feel the heat of her anger seeping through the walls. I set my drink down and stood up. My voice wouldn't come out, so I just grabbed my bag. He reached for my wrist, not rough, but firm enough to make my stomach flip. He asked where I was going like he didn't already know. I pulled free and headed for the door. As I twisted the knob, she came back out, holding a framed photo in her hands. The frame cracked where her fingers dug into it. She didn't look at him. She looked at me, then dropped the photo on the floor. The glass shattered across the wood, pieces scattering under my shoes. I didn't wait. I stepped over the shards and bolted into the hallway. The door clicked shut behind me, muffling whatever fight was about to start. My hands were shaking as I hit the button for the elevator. The ride down felt endless. Outside, the cold air hit me like a slap. I pulled out my phone, ordered a car, and kept glancing at the entrance, half expecting them to come storming out together. It didn't. The building stayed quiet, windows dark. In the car, I couldn't stop replaying it. The lipstick glass, the photos, the way she stared straight through me. None of it made sense. Why bring me there? Why pretend she was just a roommate when it was so obvious? The driver kept asking if I was okay. I nodded, but inside I felt sick. I wasn't scared of him. I was scared of her. The look in her eyes wasn't just anger. It was betrayal sharpened into something else. Something that felt aimed at me even though I didn't sign up for any of it. By the time I got home, his profile was gone from the app. Deleted. Like he'd already planned to disappear after. My messages were still there, though, sitting in the chat window, making me wonder if he'd been messaging her too, lighting us both up like pawns. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her standing there in that hoodie, holding the photo like it was proof. Proof that I didn't belong in that apartment. Proof that she was never just a roommate. The scariest part, she never said a word to me. Not one, just silence. Eyes locked, like she was letting me know without speaking that I was the intruder. And that silence was louder than anything he could have said. I should walk out the second I saw her sitting there. I'd shown up to the restaurant a few minutes early, scanning the room for her, expecting that little awkward wave people do when they spot each other for the first time. And yeah, she was there, but she wasn't alone. Sitting right next to her was this older woman, same hair color, same eyes, staring at the entrance like she already knew I was coming. At first, I thought maybe it was just some random mix-up, like her mom had dropped her off and was about to leave. But no, they both looked at me at the exact same time, and the daughter gave this tiny smile while the mom waved me over like she was the one who'd invited me. I slid into the booth, still half convinced she'd say her mom was just stopping by for a minute. Instead, the mom started talking before I could even introduce myself. Asking about my job, where I lived, what my family was like. Her daughter sat there next to her, hands folded in her lap, barely looking at me. Menus came, but the daughter didn't even touch hers. The mom grabbed both, skinned them like she was scanning a contract, then ordered for the table without even asking. She picked a drink for me too, like she'd already memorized what kind of guy I was supposed to be. The whole thing felt off. I tried making eye contact with the daughter, hoping maybe she'd jump in. But every time she glanced up, she immediately looked back down. It was like she was a ghost at her own date. The mom kept going. She talked about her daughter in third person like she wasn't even sitting there. Telling me about her hobbies, her favorite foods, her bad habits, even little embarrassing stories from when she was younger. It was uncomfortable as hell. I didn't know whether to laugh or just nod. Every time I tried to actually ask the daughter something, the mom cut in and answered for her. I asked what kind of music she liked. Mom said she liked everything but nothing too loud. I asked if she traveled much. Mom launched into a story about a family trip to Spain. I couldn't get a word in with her. The daughter just sat quietly like she'd given up years ago. Food arrived, and the mom immediately cut up her daughter's meal before starting on her own. I watched the daughter pick at her plate with tiny bites, not saying a word. It was like watching someone eat under supervision. I kept looking around the restaurant, wondering if anyone else was picking up on how strange this was. To them, we probably just looked like a family eating out. But sitting there, I felt trapped. The mom's questions kept circling back to me: how much money I made, what kind of car I drove, what schools I went to. She asked like she was screening me, like this was an interview instead of a date. The weirdest part was how calm the daughter was through all of it. No protest, no sign she was embarrassed. She didn't roll her eyes or laugh it off. She just sat there quiet like this was the norm. At one point, the mom excused herself to the restroom. For the first time all night, it was just me and daughter sitting there. I thought finally we could actually talk, but she didn't say anything. She just kept her eyes on her plate, shoulders hunched, like she was waiting for her mom to come back. The silence was so heavy I didn't even know what to say. When the mom returned, she slipped right back into control, telling me what dessert I should order, what drink would go better with it. She even flagged the waiter down without asking me or her daughter if we wanted anything. I sat there chewing cold fries, realizing I wasn't really on a date at all. I was in some weird family ritual where the mom was running the show and the daughter was just a prop. The bill came, and before I could grab it, the mom slid it toward herself, checked the total, then handed it over to me with this look that said, "Prove yourself." I paid just to get it over with, feeling like I'd just flunked some exam I didn't know I'd signed up for. We walked out together, the three of us, into the night air. I expected the mom to say goodbye there, but she didn't. She walked with us to the bus stop, stood between us while we waited, and kept talking the entire time. The daughter stood slightly behind her, quiet, almost hidden in her shadow. When my bus came, I said goodnight and climbed on fast. I didn't look back. I didn't want to. The image of them standing there, mother front and center, daughter off to the side, was burned into my brain already. Back home, I scrolled through our chat history on the app. Every message from her had been short but normal. Nothing hinted that her mom would come along. Nothing hinted that she wouldn't even speak for herself. It made me wonder who had even sent the messages in the first place. Was it really her, or had her mom been typing them the whole time? I blocked her before I could spiral deeper into that thought. But I kept picturing that moment when the mom introduced herself, waving me over like she owned me already. And the creepiest part wasn't the interrogation or the control. It was the way the daughter sat there, silent, almost invisible, like she wasn't shocked at all. Like this was just how dates went for her. I had a bad feeling before I even walked into the place. Not the kind of bad feeling you get when you're scared. More like when you already know something's about to go wrong, but you don't know it yet. The restaurant he picked wasn't cheap. It had these huge glass windows, dim lighting, candles on every table. Not my usual type of spot. I usually stick to burger joints or coffee shops for first dates, something simple. But he hyped it up like it was going to be special. I thought maybe he just wanted to impress me. He was already sitting at the table when I got there, scrolling on his phone like he hadn't even noticed I walked in. He finally looked up, waved, and stood like he'd been waiting all along. He looked decent enough. Shirt, blazer, hair done. He was trying. We sat, got menus, and the waiter came by. He ordered fast, merely looking at prices, picking the most expensive steak on the menu. I ordered pasta, keeping it simple, but I couldn't help noticing how he kept adding sides, a bottle of wine, appetizers like he was feeding a family. I thought it was odd, but figured maybe he was just one of those big eaters. Conversation was fine. Nothing special, but enough to get through the night. He asked surface-level stuff, told me stories that felt a little too polished, like ones he'd told before. He laughed a lot, but never quite reached his eyes. When the food came, he dug in like he hadn't eaten in days. Talking with his mouth full, reaching for the bread and pouring more wine. I picked at my pasta and tried to keep things going. But the more he ate, the more he seemed distracted, like his mind was somewhere else. Halfway through, he reached into his jacket pocket, patted around, then froze. He gave me this look like he just realized something terrible. He started fumbling through his pockets, then let out a sigh. He said he'd forgotten his wallet. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, not sure if he was serious. He kept patting his blazer, his jeans, even checked under the table like it might have fallen. Then he leaned back, shrugged, and said I'd have to cover the bill. He said it casual, like it wasn't a big deal. I laughed it off at first, thinking maybe he was joking. But he wasn't. He went right back to eating like nothing happened, while I sat there trying to process it. I didn't want to cause a scene, so I just nodded. Fine, I'd cover it. The bill was going to be massive, though, I knew it. Between the steak, the sides, the bottle of wine, and everything else he ordered, it was adding up in my head like a nightmare. After a while, I excused myself to the bathroom. I needed a minute to breathe to figure out how I was going to handle this without losing it. My stomach was in knots, and I could still taste the bitterness of the wine I didn't even want in the first place. When I came back out, the table was empty. His plate was half finished. The wine glass tipped slightly, his chair pushed in. I froze. My jacket was still draped over my chair. My bag was still there, but he was gone. I looked around the restaurant, scanning every booth, every corner. Nothing. He wasn't at the bar, he wasn't outside smoking, he wasn't in the hallway to the restrooms. He was just gone. The waiter came over, placed the bill on the table, then walked away. I pulled it open and my stomach dropped. The total was higher than my weekly paycheck. All the sides, the appetizers, the steak, the wine, it added up to a ridiculous amount. And now it was all on me. I felt everyone's eyes on me, like they knew exactly what had happened. I imagined the waiters in the back whispering about it, shaking their heads. Another idiot stuck with the bill. I pulled out my card, hands shaking, and slid it into the little leather folder. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like the whole room could hear it. The waiter came back, took it without a word, and I sat there staring at the empty seat across from me. When the card machine beeped, reality hit. I just paid for a night that wasn't mine. For food I didn't eat, wine I didn't want, sides I didn't touch. I wanted to scream, but my voice felt locked inside my chest. I walked out into the night air, my legs heavy, stomach twisted. The city buzzed around me, neon lights flickering, people laughing on the sidewalks. Nobody cared that I had just been left behind with a hole in my bank account. On the ride home, I checked my phone. No messages from him. His profile on the app was gone. Deleted. Wiped clean. Like he never existed. I kept refreshing, hoping maybe it was just a glitch. But no, he was gone, along with my money. At home, I stared at the receipt crumpled in my bag. The numbers glared back at me, mocking. A full steak dinner, all of wine, sides stacked like a feast for him, and I paid for it. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. My brain kept replaying every second. The way he ordered without thinking. The way he forgot his wallet. The way he vanished the second I went to the bathroom. And the part that gets me the most isn't the money. It's that he planned it. The whole thing was staged from the start. The fancy restaurant, the expensive food, the fake stories. It was never a date. It was a setup. And I walked right into it. I thought it was going to be one of those boring, harmless first dates. Nothing crazy. Just a quiet cafe in the middle of the city with dim lights and mismatched furniture. The kind of place where the barista has a mustache that looks like it belongs in a different century, and every table wobbles no matter where you sit. I picked it because I figured it was safe, cheap, and easy to bail if things got awkward. She showed up 10 minutes late, walked in with this big smile like she already knew me. I thought that was just her being friendly. She hugged me immediately, tight and familiar, like we'd been friends for years instead of strangers from an app. I laughed it off, sat down with her, and tried to ignore how weird it felt. We ordered coffee, she added a slice of cake, and we started talking. It was fine at first. Normal date questions, surface level jokes. She asked about my job, I asked about hers, we compared music tastes, travel stories, all that filler stuff. She kept locking eyes with me like she was studying every single thing I said. Then halfway through, when I was mid-sip of my drink, she leaned across the table and dropped it. She said she was pregnant. And not just pregnant, pregnant with my child. The cup almost slipped out of my hand. I laughed, thinking maybe she was messing with me. But her face didn't budge. No smile, no wink, no hint of a joke. Dead serious. She just sat there, staring like she'd been waiting all night to say it. My brain short-circuited. I reminded myself that this was literally the first time I'd ever seen her in person. We hadn't met before. We hadn't even kissed. And now she was telling me she was carrying my kid. I froze, trying to figure out how to react. She didn't give me much time. She started explaining, calm as anything, like this was the most normal conversation in the world. She said she'd known for weeks, that she was sure it was mine, and that I needed to step up. She said it like we were already in some kind of long-term relationship. I kept glancing around the cafe, half expecting someone to jump out with a camera. But no one was watching. People were just sipping their lats, tapping on laptops, living their lives while my reality got flipped upside down at this shaky wooden table. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She laid it on the table like it was evidence. I hesitated before opening it, but curiosity won. It was some kind of printout from a clinic, a test result. It had her name, some dates, and the word positive in big bold letters. No mention of me, obviously, but she tapped a page with her finger like it was a contract. I didn't know what to do. My chest tightened, and I started running through every possible explanation. Maybe she was confused. Maybe she was unstable. Maybe she'd mistaken me for someone else, but she didn't look confused. She looked confident, like she believed every word coming out of her mouth. She started talking about baby names. I swear, sitting right there in that cafe with crumbs on the table, she started listing names she liked, asking which ones I preferred. Her tone was casual, like she was asking me to help pick out a movie. I wanted to leave, but I felt frozen. It was like being trapped in a nightmare where your brain knows something's impossible, but your body doesn't know how to react. She kept going, outlining plans, where we'd live, how we'd split costs, even what kind of stroller she wanted. All of it spilling out in this calm, steady voice while my stomach flipped. At one point, she reached across the table and touched my hand. I pulled back instinctively, and her face flickered just for a second, like she wasn't expecting me to resist. Then she smiled again, softer, like she was trying to reel me back in. The cake sat untouched between us, fork still stuck in the frosting. My coffee had gone cold, but my hand stayed wrapped around the cup like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. I muttered something about needing the bathroom, stood up fast, and walked away. My legs felt heavy, my palms sweaty. I splashed water on my face at the sink, staring at myself in the mirror, trying to convince myself this was real life. When I came back, she was still there, smiling. Test result folded neatly on the table again, like nothing had happened. She waved me back over, patting the seat next to her, like we were some happy couple about to plan our future. I sat down only long enough to grab my jacket. I didn't even bother finishing the coffee. She watched me stand, expression never changing. Just smiling, calm, certain. I walked out of that cafe, her eyes following me the whole way. Outside, the air hit me like a shock. I pulled out my phone, heart racing, and opened the app. Her profile was still there. I stared at her photos, the ones I'd swiped on a week ago, and they didn't match the girl in that cafe anymore. Those pictures were bright, filtered casual. The girl I just sat across from was someone else entirely. By the time I got home, her profile was gone. Deleted, like she'd already erased herself from the platform. My messages with her were still there, though. Normal conversations, nothing strange. Not a single hint that she'd pull something like that. That night, I lay in bed wide awake, staring at the ceiling. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her smile. That calm, steady smile that said she wasn't joking, wasn't bluffing, wasn't confused. She believed every word she said. And the scariest part wasn't the claim. It was that she looked so sure. When he said he had a surprise for me, I thought it would be something normal. You know, like a lookup point, or maybe some random late-night diner only locals knew about. Not what it ended up being. The night had started off okay. We met at a fast food place, ate greasy burgers, laughed out the music blasting too loud from the kitchen. It felt normal, harmless. He seemed chill enough, a little awkward but not creepy. By the time we were done eating, I figured the date would just end with a casual goodbye. That's when he leaned back and said he wanted to show me something cool. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to say no, but he sounded excited, like he planned this all along. Against my better judgment, I agreed. He grinned, tossed the wrappers in the trash, and told me to follow him to his car. It wasn't far, an old pickup parked under a flickering streetlight. The inside smelled faintly of cigarettes and gasoline. I climbed in, nerves buzzing in my stomach, but I told myself not to overthink it. He drove fast, hands gripping the wheel, eyes fixed straight ahead. He didn't talk much during the ride, just hummed along to some static-filled station while I stared out at the passing lights. We left the main roads, turning down quieter streets until even those gave way to darker, empty ones. Warehouses, storage complexes, chain-link fences topped with barbed wire. The kind of area that looks abandoned at night, even if people work there during the day. He pulled into a lot line with long rows of storage units. The headlights swept over metal doors painted different colors, each one locked with a fat padlock. The air felt heavy still. I asked where we were, but he just told me to wait and see. He parked in front of one of the units, hopped out, and pulled a key from his pocket. My chest tightened as he shoved it into the lock, rattling the door until it screeched upward. Cold air rushed out, thick and sour, like raw meat left in the sun too long. The smell hit me so hard I gagged. Inside, the space was lit by a single buzzing bulb hanging from the ceiling. My eyes adjusted slowly, and then I saw them. Deer carcasses. At least half a dozen, maybe more, strung up on thick meat hooks along the walls. Their legs dangled, their bodies gutted, hides half peeled away. Blood stained the concrete floor in wide, dark patches that looked almost black under the weak light. Knives of all sizes lined a table against the wall, some clean, some not. The air reeked of iron, rot, and something else I couldn't place. I froze in the doorway, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at me to run. He stepped inside like it was nothing, grinning as he gestured around. He called it his side hustle. I couldn't move. My brain tried to process what I was seeing, but it was too much. The smell clung to my throat, my eyes watered, and the sight of those lifeless bodies swaying slightly on their hooks made my stomach twist. He walked over to one of them, patted its leg casually, then picked up a knife from the table. The metal glinted under the bowl. He started talking, calm, almost proud. Said he hunted them himself, that he processed the meat and sold it for cash. He explained it like he was giving me a tour of his art studio. My legs were shaking so bad I thought I might collapse. I stepped back toward the door, trying to play it cool, but every inch of me screamed to get out. He noticed, tilted his head, then laughed, like he thought my reaction was funny. He set the knife down, but the sound of it clattering against the metal table echoed through the space, sharp and final. The smell got stronger the longer I stood there. It was in my clothes and my hair, coating the inside of my mouth. I covered my nose with my sleeve, but it didn't help. My eyes darted to the corner where a stack of plastic tubs sat. Lids cracked open, filled with more cuts of meat wrapped in paper. Flies buzzed lazily around them. He kept talking, moving from hook to hook, gesturing with his hands like a teacher in front of a classroom. I didn't hear most of it. My mind was too busy planning how to leave. If I bolted, would he chase me? If I screamed, would anyone hear in this empty lot? My phone was in my pocket, but my hands felt too heavy to grab it. I forced myself to nod along, pretending to listen, inching toward the open door. The cool night air just outside looked like the only safe thing in the world. He finally noticed I was edging away and frowned, like he couldn't understand why I wasn't impressed. I muttered something about needing air and stepped outside. The moment I hit the parking lot, I gulped in deep breaths, the smell still stuck in my nose but fading just enough to clear my head. He followed me out slowly, wiping his hands on a rag, still smiling like this was all normal. He pulled the door down, the metal screeching again, and locked it with a sharp click. The sound made my stomach drop. It felt final, like a seal closing over something that should have never been opened. He offered to drive me home, but I shook my head fast and muttered about calling a ride instead. His smile faltered just for a second, but then he shrugged and climbed back into his truck. He revved the engine. He gave me one last look, then drove off, headlights cutting through the dark until they disappeared. I stood there in the lot, shaking, pulling my phone out with trembling fingers. I ordered a ride, staring at the row of locked units, wondering how many others hid things like his. The driver arrived 10 minutes later, and I didn't look back as we pulled away. At home, I stripped my clothes off and threw them straight in the wash, but the smell still lingered in my nose. Even now, I can picture the dim light, the hooks, the lifeless bodies swaying slightly as the bulb buzzed above them. And I'll never forget the way he smiled while showing me all of it, like he thought I'd be impressed. I should have known something was off the second she walked in. She was all smiles at first, almost too friendly. She waved at the waiter before even saying hi to me, like she was a regular there or like she wanted everyone to notice her arrival. I told myself it was nerves. First dates make people act weird. Maybe she just overcompensated with energy. We sat down, ordered drinks. For the first 20 minutes, it was fine. Normal, even. Small talk, light laughs. I made a dumb joke about nearly spilling water on myself. She laughed a little too hard, but I didn't mind. I thought maybe we'd find a rhythm. The restaurant wasn't fancy, just one of those noisy, casual spots where tables are shoved too close together and waiters weave between them like traffic cops balancing plates on their arms. Families, couples, coworkers. It was busy, voices overlapping into a steady wall of chatter. The chaos felt safe. You don't expect anything bad to happen in a place like that. That's probably why what happened next hit me so hard. Out of nowhere, she raised her voice. Not just a little louder than before, but sharp, cutting through the room like a knife. At first, I thought she was joking. The way she snapped upright, eyes wide, words spilling out, it seemed like an over-the-top bit. I even smiled for a split second, waiting for the punchline. But then I caught the look on her face. Serious, angry, accusing, like I had just done something unforgivable. You're really gonna sit here and text other girls while I'm right across from you, she barked. The words didn't make sense at first. My phone was face down on the table, untouched. I blinked at her, confused. What? I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. She didn't stop. And what? Are you gonna make me pay for everything too? Is that the kind of guy you are? Her voice carried loud enough to hush nearby tables. My stomach dropped. Heads turned. Forks hovered midair. The background chatter thinned until I felt dozens of strangers' eyes shift onto me. I didn't. I stammered, but she cut me off. And don't you dare grab my arm again, she shouted, jerking her hand back as if I'd been holding it under the table. I hadn't even touched her. The silence around us was deafening. It was like the restaurant had become a stage, and I'd been cast as the villain in a play I didn't audition for. I tried to speak, but every time I opened my mouth, she talked over me, louder, faster. Her words tumbled out like she'd rehearsed them. It wasn't sloppy or panicked. It was deliberate, a performance she perfected. People at nearby tables glared at me, lips pursed, heads shaking. I could feel the judgment soaking in my skin, hot and heavy. To them, I was guilty because she said so. 2 waiters appeared almost instantly, then the manager. They hovered, eyes darting between us, trying to calm her. She clutched her drink like it was an anchor, pointing at me with her free hand. Her voice wavered in all the right places, trembling as she claimed I was making her uncomfortable. I wanted to disappear. My throat was dry, my hands clammy. My chest tightened like I couldn't get enough air. I wasn't just being accused, I was being framed. The manager crouched slightly, his voice low but firm. Sir, maybe you should step outside for a moment. My face burned. I stood slowly, every eye in the restaurant glued to me. She stayed seated, arms crossed, basking in the spotlight like it was hers alone. Just before I turned away, I caught the tiniest flicker of a smile on her lips. Not wide, not obvious, but unmistakable satisfaction. I pushed through the doors into the night air, my chest heaving. The contrast was jarring. Inside, a storm. Outside, just the muffled sound of traffic and the distant buzz of neon signs. I leaned against the brick wall, palms pressed flat, trying to steady my breathing. Inside, muffled through the glass, I could still hear her voice. Minutes crawled by before the manager joined me. He looked uncomfortable, hands stuffed in his pockets, eyes avoiding mine. Look, he muttered, maybe it's best to call it a night. Things got tense in there. I wanted to defend myself, to tell him she made it all up. But I saw the way he looked at me, hesitant, skeptical. He didn't say it outright, but I could read his expression. He believed her. Or at least, he thought there was a chance she was right. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Yeah, I said flatly, my voice hoarse. Fine. I turned and walked. Every step away from that restaurant felt heavier than the last. The humiliation sank in deeper with each block. The stares, the whispers, the image of her smirk, quick and fleeting before she turned back into the perfect victim. At home, I collapsed on my bed, staring at the ceiling. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, opened the app we'd matched on. Her profile was gone. Unmatched. Deleted. Erased like she'd never existed. But our messages were still there. Banal conversations about work, music, favorite foods. Nothing strange, nothing that hinted at what she'd pull. No warning signs that she'd blow up my life in front of 100 strangers. I lay there replaying the night on a loop. The sudden switch from casual chatter to screaming accusations. The way the restaurant turned against me in an instant. The smugness in her eyes, just for me, right before the staff swarmed. And the scariest part. It worked. Nobody questioned her. Nobody doubted her. She controlled the room, and I was powerless to stop it. She'd written a story where I was a villain, and everyone bought tickets. I still don't know why she did it. Maybe she gets all into chaos. Maybe it was a dare, a bet, a story she wanted to tell her friends. Maybe it was practice for something worse. I'll never know. But what I do know is this: that night taught me how fragile reputations are, how fast a stranger can flip the script on you. 1 second you're sipping water, trying to make a good impression. The next, you're standing outside a restaurant, humiliated, guilty in the eyes of 100 people, all because one person decided to scream louder than you. And that's what still chills me when I think about her. Not the accusations, not the glares, not even the humiliation. It's that she walked in already knowing exactly how the night was going to end. I knew the date wasn't going anywhere special about 20 minutes in, but I still didn't expect it to crash the way it did. We'd matched a few days before, exchanged a handful of dry texts, and decided to meet up at this mid-range restaurant downtown. Nothing too fancy, nothing too grimy. The kind of place with loud booths, neon beer signs in the windows, and a menu with way too many options. I wasn't expecting sparks, just hoping for a halfway decent night. She arrived late, sliding into the booth across from me with a half smile and a quick apology. Right away, I noticed she seemed more interested in looking around the room than actually talking to me. Every few minutes, she'd glance at the bar, or at the couple in the next booth, like she was checking who else might be watching her. I shrugged it off. People get nervous. We ordered drinks, and she immediately went for the most expensive cocktail on the list. I stuck with a beer. When the food came, she ordered a full meal with starters, something that could have fed 2 people easy. I didn't think much of it at first. I figured maybe she was just hungry. Conversation stayed shallow. She gave one-word answers, laughed at random parts of my stories that weren't funny, and kept having her phone at the table. But she did say one thing that stuck out. When the check came, she leaned in and suggested we split it. I nodded, fine. Splitting the bill is fair. The check landed, and that's when her forgetfulness kicked in. She started patting her jacket pockets, digging through her bag, muttering about her wallet. She looked at me with wide eyes, almost embarrassed, saying she must have left it at home. I sighed inside, but kept my face neutral. I didn't want to make a scene, so I just paid. Whole thing, no argument. She gave me this half-hearted thank you, then took another sip of her drink. At that point, her giant plate of food was barely touched. Half a burger, cold fries, a salad bowl that looked like it hadn't been touched at all. Her cocktail was half full, a second one nearly gone. I was staring at all that wasted food and drinks when my stomach grumbled, so I excused myself to the bathroom. It wasn't long. 2, maybe 3 minutes. I splashed water on my face, shook off the frustration, and told myself to get through the rest of the night. When I walked back, the booth was empty. Her coat, her bag, her phone, gone. The only thing left was the wreckage of her meal. Fries scattered across the plate, a burger with one bite missing, 2 watered-down cocktails sweating onto the table. She'd taken everything else and slipped out while I was gone. I froze, staring at the booth like maybe she was just in the restroom too. But the longer I stood there, the clearer it became. She'd left. Not just left. Vanished. The waiter came by, glanced at the table, then at me. He raised his eyebrows like he'd seen this before. My throat tightened as I slid back into the booth, staring at the mess she'd left behind. The drinks, the food, the tab with my card already on it. I felt stupid, embarrassed, angry, all at once. The half-eaten burger sat there taunting me, the cocktails catching the light from the neon signs in the window. She'd managed to disappear so fast it almost didn't feel real. I paid the check again when the waiter came back, even though my card had already been swiped. The extra charges from her drinks and untouched food weighed heavier than the money itself. It was the principle of it. I covered the whole night, and she didn't even have the decency to stick around long enough for me to realize what was happening. Walking out into the night, I kept glancing down the street, half hoping I'd spot her ducking into a cab or walking fast around the corner. Nothing. Just empty sidewalks, glowing street lamps, and the distant hum of traffic. She was gone. On the ride home, my phone buzzed. A notification from the app. She'd unmatched me. No explanation, no message, nothing. Just gone like she'd never been there. I sat there in the back of the car, replaying the whole night. The way she looked around the room instead of at me. The way she ordered way more than she could eat. The way she conveniently forgot her wallet after suggesting we split. And finally, the way she slipped out while I was gone, leaving me with the bill and her half-eaten food like some twisted trophy. Back at home, I dumped my jacket on the chair, sat down on the edge of the bed, and stared at the floor. My stomach still felt knotted, not from hunger, but from the humiliation. The image of that booth stuck in my head. The empty seat, the wasted food, the cocktails sweating onto the table while strangers probably whispered about me being dumb enough to fall for it. And that's how the night ended. Not with a goodbye, not even with awkward small talk on the way out. Just me staring at her unfinished burger, wallet empty, while she disappeared into the night without a trace. I thought the night was going fine at first, nothing amazing, but fine. The kind of date you go on more out of obligation than excitement. We'd been chatting for about a week on an app. His messages were normal, a little stiff maybe, but polite. No glaring red flags, no over-the-top flirting. When he suggested drinks, I figured why not. The bar we picked wasn't too packed. It had sticky tables, dim yellow lights, and music just loud enough that you had to lean in a little to hear. It smelled like beer and old wood. The kind of place where first dates happen all the time, safe and anonymous. He was already sitting there with a beer when I walked in, waved me over like he'd been waiting. His smile looked rehearsed, but I didn't think much of it. The small talk was standard. Where we grew up, what we studied. The usual trivia people exchange before deciding whether they'll ever see each other again. He laughed a lot, maybe too much, but nothing that made me want to run for the door. Just a guy who seemed a little eager. Halfway through my first drink, though, he dropped something that froze me. He asked, casual as anything, if I still went to the cafe on Willow Street every morning before work. I stared at him. It wasn't on my dating profile. I hadn't mentioned it in our chats, hadn't said it in person. The cafe on Willow Street was just part of my routine, a place I'd been going for years without thinking. A quiet little corner of my life. I asked how he knew. He shrugged, smiling, said it was on my Instagram. I brushed it off. Maybe I'd posted a photo there once or twice. I remembered a latte art picture from months ago. Okay, maybe he'd scrolled. Weird, but possible. We kept talking. I tried to shake off the unease. Then he brought up my gym schedule. He asked if I still went on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, said it must get crowded after 6. That one hit harder. I'd never posted about the gym. Not on Instagram, not anywhere. It wasn't something I shared. My routine was private, and I liked it that way. My chest tightened. I asked him again how he knew. Same answer, Instagram. I pulled out my phone under the table, scrolling through my profile. There wasn't a single mention of my gym. No photos of me in workout gear. No check-ins, nothing. I laughed awkwardly, but inside I was panicking. He just kept sipping his drink, calm, like nothing was off. Then came the worst part. He asked about my brother, said his name out loud. Casual like he'd known him forever. My younger brother's name. My skin went cold. I never posted about my brother. Not his name, not his face. He wasn't even on my social media. I asked again, sharper this time, how he knew. He leaned back, smirked, and repeated himself, Instagram. He said you could learn everything about a person just by looking close enough. I stared at him, my mind racing. Had he gone through every tagged photo, every old comment, every buried post from years back? Had he looked through my friends' profiles, followed links, pieced it together? Or was it something worse? Had he been watching me in real life? The bar suddenly felt smaller, the music quieter, the crowd blurred into shadows, unimportant. Every time I glanced at him, his eyes were already on me, steady and unblinking. He didn't look embarrassed. He looked proud, like he wanted me to know how much he dug up. My drink sat untouched in front of me. My throat was too dry to swallow. I tried changing the subject, asking him about his job, his hobbies, anything to shift the focus. But every answer was short, vague, redirected back to me. Each time he opened his mouth, another little detail slipped out. The route I took home from work, the park I liked to run in on weekends, the brand of shoes I wore. None of this was on my Instagram. I knew that for sure. My profile was mostly coffee shots, random sunsets, the occasional photo with friends. Nothing that revealed all of this. That's what hit me. He wasn't getting it from Instagram. He was watching me. The realization was so sharp my hands shook under the table. I forced a smile, pretended to laugh, and glanced at the exit. He noticed. His eyes flicked to the door, then back to me, and his smirk widened like he'd been waiting for me to understand. I muttered something about needing the restroom, grabbed my bag, and stood up. My legs felt like lead, but I pushed through the crowd and ducked around the corner. I didn't go to the bathroom. I headed straight for the door. Outside, the night air felt sharp in my lungs. I pulled my phone out, ordered a ride, and stood under the streetlight, heart pounding. My fingers shook so hard I nearly dropped the screen. I kept glancing over my shoulder, expecting him to follow. He never came out. Not while I waited, not as I climbed into the car. But the whole ride home, I couldn't shake the image of him sitting at that table, calm, confident, smirking like he knew everything about me already. When I got back, I locked the door and sat cross-legged on my couch, scrolling through my Instagram again, post by post, looking for anything he could have pulled from. There was nothing that explained how much he knew. Nothing about my brother. Nothing about my gym schedule. Nothing about the park. I deleted the app that night. Then I turned off location settings, shut down old accounts, combed through every post for clues. It didn't matter. The unease stayed. Even now, weeks later, I can't stop thinking about the way he said it. Like watching me, studying me was the most casual thing in the world. Like he wasn't just recounting what he'd seen, but promising more. And the scariest part is, I'll never know how much more he knows. I was halfway through my drink when she walked in. Not the girl I was on the date with, the other one, his ex. I didn't know she was his ex at first. All I saw was a woman making a straight line toward our table, eyes locked on him, expression flat. She didn't hesitate, didn't pause to check the room, just walked right up, pulled out a chair, and sat down across from us. The air shifted instantly. Conversations around us kept buzzing, silverware clinking, glasses clattering, but at our table everything went quiet. I expected him to flinch, to look guilty or startled, maybe even tell her to leave. But he didn't. He just sat there, calm, like this was part of the plan. She leaned back in her chair, arms folded, eyes flicking between us. I stared at him, waiting for some kind of explanation, but he just smiled faintly and took another sip of his drink. My chest tightened. She started talking casual like she'd been invited. Her words weren't loud, but her presence filled the entire table. She wasn't here by accident. That much was clear. Every time I tried to speak, she talked over me. Every time I glanced at him, he just nodded like this was all normal. That's when it clicked. He was too comfortable, too calm. He orchestrated this. The ex leaned closer, her elbows on the table, describing memories with him in detail, trips they took, inside jokes, little quirks. She looked straight at me while she said it, like every word was meant to push me further out of the circle. He didn't stop her. He didn't correct her. He just sat there, smirking, letting her take the stage. I picked at my food, appetite gone, while she listed off stories that were way too personal for me to hear on a first date. She described his apartment, his habits, even the way he slept. Each detail made my skin crawl, but what made it worse was him nodding along like he agreed. The longer it went on, the more I realized this wasn't a random interruption. This was intentional. He wanted me to hear it. He wanted me to see her. I shifted in my seat, ready to leave, and something about the way he leaned back, relaxed, blocked me. Not physically, but with presence. Like if I stood up, he'd still be there, calm, unbothered, making me look like the one who overreacted. The ex started asking me questions. Not polite ones, cutting ones. What my job was, where I lived, how I knew him. Each one sharp, each one followed by a smirk from her and silence from him. It wasn't curiosity, it was interrogation. I answered with short words, avoiding eye contact, trying to steady my hands under the table. She laughed at some of my answers, looked at him, and he smiled back. They were in sync, perfectly aligned, like I was the outsider crashing their date instead of the other way around. My drink sat warm and untouched. The food on my plate blurred. The only thing I could focus on was the weight of their stares, their shared smirks, their unspoken understanding. At one point, she reached across the table and touched his arm. He didn't pull away. He leaned into it. My chest burned as I realized I wasn't on a first date anymore. I was part of some twisted performance they'd set up together. People around us started noticing. A table of older women glanced over, whispering. A couple across the aisle raised their eyebrows. I could feel eyes pressing in from all sides, but no one stepped in. They just watched, entertained, while I sat trapped between him and his ex. Minutes stretched like hours. She kept talking, weaving stories, laughing at things I didn't understand. He kept nodding, sipping his drink, letting it happen. I felt smaller with every passing second, like my seat was sinking lower into the floor. Finally, I pushed my chair back, the screech of wood on tile louder than anything else in the room. They both looked at me at the same time, eyes calm, expressions flat. No panic, no guilt, just watching. I muttered something about leaving, grabbed my bag, and stood. Neither of them moved. Neither of them tried to stop me. They just sat there, side by side now, like I'd been the distraction all along. I walked out into the night, legs shaky, head buzzing. The noise of the restaurant muffled behind me as the door shut. Outside, the air felt thin, too sharp to breathe. I pulled my phone out with trembling hands, ordered a ride, and kept glancing back at the windows. Through the glass, I could see them. Still at the table. Still together. He was leaning closer now, smiling at her, like my leaving had been the goal the whole time. When my ride pulled up, I climbed in fast, heart pounding. I didn't look back as we drove away. At home, I checked the app. His profile was gone. Deleted just like that. No explanation, no way to ask questions, no trace left. My messages with him looked fake now, like bait leading me to that table, that night, that performance. I sat on the edge of my bed, the glow of my phone screen lighting my face, replaying every second. The calm smirk on his face, the way she slid into the seat without hesitation, the way they worked together without needing to say a word. And that's how I realized the date was never about me at all. When I first saw her, she looked completely normal, sweet even. She was already seated when I walked into the diner, waving me over with a smile that felt genuine, not forced. I remember thinking, finally, maybe this one will just be a regular night. The place smelled like fried onions and burnt coffee, the kind of 24-hour spot that felt safe in its banality. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead, casting everything in a yellow haze. Couples sat in booths, tired truckers hunched over mugs, and a waitress in worn sneakers weaved between tables with a pot of coffee in one hand. It wasn't romantic, but it was neutral territory. Familiar. I slid into the booth across from her. The first 20 minutes went smoothly enough. We traded the usual surface-level facts, favorite movies, bands we pretended to know more about than we actually did, that sort of thing. She laughed at my dumb jokes, nodded earnestly when I rambled about a podcast I'd just gotten into. She seemed shy, but in a way that drew you in, made you lean closer so you didn't miss a word. For the first time in a while, I felt myself relax. Then she reached into her purse. At first, I thought she was grabbing lip balm, maybe her phone. Instead, she pulled out a knife. Not some tiny pocket knife or a novelty keychain blade. An honest-to-God folding knife with a black handle. She clicked it open with a practiced flick of her wrist and set it down on the table between us. The clack of metal on laminate made my stomach flip. She smiled at me, calm as if she'd just pulled out a pen, and said, "Don't worry. I only use it if guys get handsy." I froze. My brain tried to tell me she was joking, that this was some dark humor icebreaker. But her face didn't match her words. She wasn't laughing. Her expression was serene, matter of fact, like she was stating a personal policy. The knife sat there, inches from my hand, the blade catching the harsh diner light. My eyes flicked from it to her and back again. She sipped her soda casually, the straw crackling the ice like nothing strange had happened. The air shifted. My burger sat untouched in front of me, fries cooling into rubbery sticks. I couldn't take a bite, couldn't even lift my fork. All I could do was glance at the blade and then back at her. She noticed, of course. She leaned back in the booth, one arm draped lazily over the seat, almost like she enjoyed watching me squirm. I forced myself to keep the conversation going, asked her about her job, her hobbies, anything that might steer us back into safe, ordinary territory. But every time I spoke, her hand drifted toward the knife, not grabbing it outright, just tapping the handle, spinning it lazily, reminding me it was there. The diner's background noise faded. The clatter of dishes, the hum of conversations, the hiss of the fryers in the kitchen, all of it dulled. My focus tunneled onto the blade, glinting between us. That's when she started telling stories. They came out of nowhere, casual, unsettling anecdotes about bad dates. Guys who didn't know their boundaries. Each story was vague, but every single one ended the same way, with her saying she handled it. No elaboration, no details. Just those two words. Handled it. Her eyes narrowed slightly each time she said it, her lips twitching into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. I nodded along, my throat dry, forcing out weak laughs whenever she smirked. My hand stayed hidden under the table, gripping my knees so tight that my knuckles throbbed. Minutes dragged like hours. The knife sat untouched, but it was alive in my mind, a silent third person in our booth. At one point, the waitress came by to refill our drinks. Her eyes flicked to the knife, lingered a second too long, but she didn't say anything. Just poured the soda, muttered a polite enjoy, and walked away. My chest tightened. Nobody was going to step in. To everyone else, it was just another couple on a date. The meal crawled forward. She barely ate, just pushed fries around her plate while spinning stories. I forced myself to chew a few bites of food, though each swallow felt like choking down gravel. My eyes darted constantly between her and the blade, waiting for her to reach for it. Every laugh of hers rang sharp, rehearsed. Not joy, but control. She was enjoying the discomfort radiating off me, soaking it like warmth. When the check came, she finally picked up the knife, closed it with a loud snap, and slipped it back into her purse. She smiled then, wide and bright, as if the entire night had been perfectly normal. My shoulders ached from how tense I'd been. My jaw throbbed from clenching, but I forced a grin, pulled out my wallet, and paid. Handing over those bills felt like buying my way out of a nightmare. We walked out together into the night air. I half expected her to keep talking, maybe a reach for the purse again, but she just pulled her jacket tight around herself and said something I didn't even process. Then she waved, casual as anything, and disappeared down the street. I stood there frozen, half expecting her to turn back, half expecting to see the glint of the blade again of the streetlights. But she didn't. She just walked into the dark and was gone. I ordered a ride with trembling hands. Even inside the car, with the city lights flashing past the window, I couldn't shake the image. That knife sitting between us, her calm smile, or tapping the handle with each story. Back home, I stared at my phone. Her profile was still active on the app. Pictures of her smiling at the beach, holding a dog, sipping coffee. Sweet captions about sunsets and Sunday mornings. None of it matched the woman who'd calmly set a weapon between us in a diner booth and grinned while I squirmed. I had matched her that night, but even now I can't stop thinking about the way she said it. Don't worry, only guys get handsy. And the worst part wasn't the knife, it was her calmness. The way she looked at me, serene and unblinking, while that blade sat between us like a silent promise. The first half of the date actually felt fine. Nothing amazing, but not terrible either. We met at a little Italian place that sat on the corner of a busy street, the kind of spot with candles on every table and bread baskets that never seemed to end. I'd been nervous walking in, but once we sat down and started talking, I thought maybe it'd just be one of those average nights. He was chatty, maybe a little too chatty. He leaned in a lot, smiled often, and cracked dumb jokes that weren't all that funny, but I laughed anyway. He asked about my family, about work, the usual. The room buzzed with noise, servers weeding between tables, plates clinking, people laughing from every corner. It felt normal. Then, halfway through my pasta, I noticed them. Two guys sitting at a table a few rows back, not directly behind him, but angled just enough that they had a clear view of ours. At first, I didn't think anything of it, just two random men having dinner. But then I noticed the way they kept looking up from their food, not at me and him. It was subtle at first, a quick glance and nod, then back to their meals. But the longer I watched, the more I realized it wasn't random. They were watching him, and he was watching back. He'd glance over every few minutes, sometimes mid-sentence, sometimes when I was taking a sip of my drink. And every time, one of the guys would give a little hand signal, a scratch on the chin, a tug of the ear, fingers tapping the glass in a rhythm that felt rehearsed. And every time, his expression shifted just slightly, like he was taking direction. My stomach tightened. I tried to keep talking, but my eyes kept darting back to them. The guys weren't eating much. Their plates sat mostly full, drinks sweating in the candlelight while their attention locked on us. One leaned forward, whispering to the other, and they both smirked. That's when I realized it. They weren't just nearby. They were there for him. For us. I tested it. I asked him a question about his job, something he'd already told me earlier, just to see if he'd answer the same way. He hesitated, glanced toward his friends, then adjusted his answer. My chest went cold. He wasn't just on a date, he was being coached. Every detail after that started to feel off. The way he leaned back when one of them rubbed his temple. The way he laughed a little too hard right after one of them snapped their fingers against the table. It was like watching a puppet show, and I was the only one who didn't know I was in the audience. I couldn't eat anymore. My fork just dragged through the pasta, eyes locked on him as he kept sneaking glances past my shoulder. I started wondering how long they'd been there. Did they come in with him? Did they follow us? Were they here before we even arrived? I shifted in my seat, trying to block his view, but he leaned to the side, stretching his neck just enough to catch another signal. His friends barely smiled anymore. Their faces were serious, calculating like this was some kind of experiment. The room felt smaller by the minute. The noise of the restaurant dulled into the background, muffled, like I was underwater. All I could hear was my pulse and the scrape of forks on plates. I excused myself to the bathroom just to breathe. Inside the stall, I pressed my back against the door, heart racing, trying to figure out what to do. If I left, they'd see. If I went back, I'd be sitting under their microscope again. Either way, I was trapped. After a few minutes, I forced myself out. When I walked back, the two men were still there, their eyes cutting to me as I passed. One of them smiled faintly, not warm, not friendly, just enough to let me know he'd seen me notice. I sat back down, hands trembling under the table. He smiled at me like nothing was wrong, asked if I was okay, but I could see it in his eyes. He knew I figured it out, and he didn't care. The rest of the night dragged. I answered his questions with short words, avoided looking over his shoulder, and pushed food around my plate until the check came. He insisted on paying, but even that felt staged, like something his friends had told him to do. When we stood to leave, I caught one last glimpse of the men. They stayed seated, didn't move, just watched us walk out. Their table was still full, meals untouched, drinks barely sipped. They hadn't come to eat. They'd come to watch. Outside, the night air felt sharp, too thin to breathe. He offered to walk me home, but I shook my head, muttered something about calling a ride. He looked disappointed but not surprised, like he'd expected it. I stood under the streetlight, clutching my phone, heart pounding as I ordered a car. He lingered nearby, hands in his pockets, eyes scanning the street. I kept glancing at the restaurant windows, half expecting to see his friends follow us out. They didn't, not yet. When my ride pulled up, I climbed in fast. He waved, calm, smiling like the night had gone perfectly. The car pulled away, and I kept looking back until the lights of the restaurant disappeared. At home, I lay on my bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every signal, every glance, every smirk. The realization dug in deeper with every thought. None of it had been real. Not the jokes, not the smiles, not even the way he looked at me. It had all been directed, stage managed from a table a few rows back. And the worst part was knowing I'd been the only one at that table without a script. I didn't notice anything strange about her at first. She walked in with this huge grin, slid into the booth across from me, and immediately started talking about how she hated online dating but figured she'd give it one more chance. She was bubbly, almost over the top, her words spilling out too quickly like she'd rehearsed them. Well, I chalked it up to nerves. First dates were awkward. Everyone put on some kind of act. The diner felt safe. neutral. Families sat in the back, couples leaned across sticky tables, and TVs above the bar blasted highlights from some game. The air smelled faintly of grease and fryer oil, the kind of background scent you barely notice after a few minutes. The waitress handed us menus with a tired smile, and I relaxed into the booth. We ordered burgers and beers, nothing fancy. Just two people trying to fill the silence with small talk. She laughed at everything I said, maybe too much, but it was better than dead air. I told myself this could be fine. Not fireworks, but fine. Halfway through the meal, she dropped it. Casually, like she was commenting on the weather. She said she'd just gotten out of prison. I froze with a fry halfway to my mouth. She didn't look embarrassed, didn't even lower her voice. She said it calm, almost cheerful, like it was some quirky fun fact. The kind of thing you might share in a two truths and a lie game. I asked what for. I didn't even think, just blurted it out. That's when she paused, leaned back against the booth, and smirked. Her eyes narrowed slightly as she said, "You'll find out if you ever make me mad." The words hung heavy between us. My chest tightened. My skin prickled like someone had poured ice water down my spine. She laughed softly, picked up her burger, and went right back to eating like nothing had happened. I couldn't focus on the food anymore. My brain spun in frantic circles. Prison. Not county jail, not probation. Prison. And the way she said it made it worse. It wasn't just a warning. It was a promise. Every time she reached into her bag, my heart jumped. Every time she leaned forward, I flinched. She talked about random things after that, music, movies, food, but her words blurred into background noise. I could barely hear her over the pounding in my ears. All I could think about was what she'd done to get locked up, and why she wouldn't tell me. The longer I sat there, the more I noticed things I'd brushed off earlier. The way her nails tapped against the glass, steady and rhythmic like she was keeping time. The way her eyes darted around the room, scanning every corner before settling back on me. The way her smile never touched her eyes, like it was something she'd learned to imitate. I tried to keep the conversation light, steering into safe territory. Work, hobbies, travel. But she had a way of twisting everything. If I asked about her job, she said she'd figure something out. If I asked about her family, she laughed and said they didn't ask questions anymore. Each answer was a dead end. Every sentence carried a shadow. My stomach knotted. The burger turned to lead in my mouth. She leaned in at one point, so close I could smell the beer on her breath. Her voice dropped to a whisper, and she said, "People underestimate me because I look sweet." And she laughed again, soft and sharp, and sat back like she'd just told a harmless joke. But it wasn't harmless. Nothing about her felt harmless anymore. The waitress came by with a check, and I almost begged her with my eyes not to leave. But she dropped the bill and vanished, leaving me trapped across from that too bright smile. My hands trembled as I reached for my wallet. The card slipped against my fingers. I fumbled so badly she noticed. "You nervous?" she asked, tilting her head, her smirk widening. I forced a laugh, but it came out brittle. My hands gave me away. They were shaking so hard I almost dropped the card onto the floor. We left together, stepping into the night air. The street was quiet, too quiet. Just the hum of a street lamp and the occasional car passing by. She walked close, too close, brushing against my arm with every few steps. My throat felt like sandpaper. She asked where I lived. I lied, gave some vague answer about the opposite side of town. She didn't argue, didn't call me out. She just nodded slowly, eyes fixed on me, studying me like she could peel the truth straight off my skin. When we reached the corner, I mumbled that I had to call it a night. She smiled, leaned in so close her lips almost brushed my ear, and whispered, "I hope you don't make me mad." Then she turned and walked away, vanishing into the dark without a backward glance. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, phone in hand, pretending to scroll while my heart hammered. I didn't move until her silhouette disappeared completely. When I finally ordered a ride, my palms were slick with sweat. Every passing car made me flinch. The whole way home, I kept seeing her smirk, hearing that soft laugh, replaying her words in my head. At home, I locked the doors, checked the windows twice, then sat awake on the couch with every light on. I couldn't shake the feeling that she knew more about me than she should, that she could find me if she wanted to. My phone buzzed once. A message from her. Just a smiley face. No words, no context, just a simple yellow smile. I, Nestor, immediately deleted the app and sat staring at the wall. But my brain kept looping the same thought. She wasn't hiding what she'd done because she was ashamed. She was hiding it because she wanted me to wonder. And that's worse. The night started like any other first date. Awkward smiles, a quick hello, a little small talk while waiting to be seated. The restaurant wasn't anything special, just one of those noisy mid-range places with booths crammed too close together and cheap wine glasses that clinked too loudly. A game played on a muted TV above the bar. Silverware clattered. Conversations overlapped until they became a low, constant hum. I wasn't nervous. Not really. I've been on enough first dates to know the drill. Smile, small talk, check your phone in the bathroom, leave if it's terrible. This felt routine, harmless. At least until he opened his mouth and called me by the wrong name. It wasn't even close to mine. A completely different name, like he pulled it from someone else's story. He said it so casually, like it had always been mine, like he'd been saying it for years. I corrected him at first, lightly, just laughing it off. No, actually, it's my name. He didn't flinch. He nodded, smiled, and kept right on calling me the other name. At first, I thought maybe he just misheard me on the app. Maybe he was nervous and had it mixed up. People blank on names all the time, but it kept happening, over and over. Every time he addressed me, it was the same wrong name. And the weirdest part, he never hesitated. It rolled off his tongue like second nature, like he practiced it. I tried to steer the conversation back to safe topics, food, work, music. He'd nod, smile, and then slip the name in again. Each time, my stomach dropped a little lower. Halfway through the meal, I corrected him again. This time, firmly. I told him my name slowly, clearly, making sure he heard it. He froze for a second, eyes narrowing. Then he shook his head. He said I was lying. The air around me went heavy. The clatter of plates and hum of voices dulled until it felt like the whole restaurant was pressing in on us. He leaned forward, elbows on the table, eyes locked onto mine. "That's not your name," he said. "Stop playing games. I know who you are." His voice was calm, but his eyes burned. He looked at me like I just told him the sky was green. I laughed nervously, tried to brush it off again, but he didn't laugh back. His jaw tightened, his hand clenched around his fork, and he repeated the wrong name louder, firmer. The rest of the night unraveled fast. He kept telling stories, weaving that wrong name into them like punctuation. Every time he said it, he stared at me, daring me to argue. His tone shifted, less playful, more insistent, like he was trying to hammer the name into me until I stopped resisting. I stayed quiet, my hands shaking under the table, heart thudding in my chest. The food turned cold. My appetite was gone. I forced bites just to look busy, chewing while his words filled the space between us. He wasn't smiling anymore. He wasn't charming. He was locked in, obsessed, repeating the name like it defined me. I glanced around the restaurant, hoping someone might notice how uncomfortable I was, but nobody did. Couples laughed, waiters rushed by, glasses clinked. Everyone else, it was just another dinner. When the check came, he snatched it up before I could even reach. He paid fast, then turned back to me, eyes hard, voice low. "I don't know why you're lying about who you are," he said. "I hate liars." My chest burned. My legs itched to move. I muttered something about needing to leave, grabbed my bag, and slid out of the booth. He stood immediately close behind me, still repeating the wrong name under his breath like a mantra. Outside, the air was sharp, but it didn't clear my head. He walked beside me, too close, matching my steps. He kept saying the name, softer now, almost like he was trying to convince himself, or convince me. Streetlights threw long shadows across the pavement. A bus hissed by. My heart felt like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest. When I reached the corner, I pulled out my phone, pretending to text. He stopped, finally, staring at me with this strange mix of anger and confusion. His eyes scanned me from head to toe, like he was cataloging me. Then he tilted his head and whispered the name one last time before turning and walking away. I stood frozen until he disappeared into the dark. My hands shook as I ordered a ride, glancing over my shoulder every few seconds, terrified he'd come back. In the back of the car, I stared out the window, but kept seeing his face reflected faintly in the glass. The way he looked at me when I corrected him. The way he insisted I was lying. The way he said the name with such certainty, like it belonged to me whether I wanted it or not. When I got home, I sat on the edge of my bed replaying every second. I opened the app, scrolling through our old chats. Our real name was there, clear as day. He hadn't misread it. He hadn't forgotten. He'd chosen to call me something else. And the scariest part, he believed it. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It wasn't a joke. It was a conviction. Like he decided who I was long before I sat down at that table. And for one long, suffocating hour, I felt myself being erased, piece by piece, replaced by someone else's name. She was already drunk when she showed up. I noticed it the second she walked in. Her steps weren't steady, her eyes were glazed, and her smile was way too wide for someone meeting a stranger for the first time. She spotted me at the table and waved with both hands, nearly tripping over a chair on her way over. I stood up to help her sit down, but she brushed me off, slurring something about being fine. The smell hit me next, booze, heavy and sour, clinging to her clothes like perfume. She dropped into the seat across from me and giggled, loud enough for the couple at the next table to look over. I tried to be polite, asked if she was okay if she wanted water, but she waved her hand and ordered another drink from the server before I could stop her. Her words slurred together, but the meaning was clear. She wasn't planning on sobering up. The first few minutes were chaos. She knocked her fork onto the floor twice, spilled water down her front, and kept leaning across the table to poke at my arm like it was hilarious. I kept telling myself maybe nerves had made her drink too much beforehand. Maybe she'd calm down once she ate. But then I noticed them. 3 people sitting across the bar. 2 girls, 1 guy. They weren't just casually watching the game on TV. They were watching us. Every time she slurred something or stumbled in her chair, I catch them laughing into their phones, pointing, recording. My stomach dropped. She caught me looking their way and laughed even louder. Then she leaned in close, breath hot with alcohol, and whispered that her friends had dared her to go on this date. It wasn't even a secret. She said it proud, like it was some kind of achievement. She said they wanted to see if she could make it through the night without passing out, and now they were here to watch. She even waved at them, and they waved back, phones still aimed in our direction. The room shifted in that moment. The noise of the bar faded, replaced by the buzzing in my ears. I wasn't on a date anymore. I was in someone else's joke. She kept talking, rambling about nonsense, her words tripping over each other, while her friends across the room laughed and filmed. Every move I made felt like it was under a microscope. Every sip of my drink, every awkward smile, every glance toward them. I wanted to leave, but her eyes locked on me every time I shifted in my seat. She slurred my name like a chant loud, making sure everyone around us heard. The people at the next table were staring openly now, probably wondering why I hadn't walked out already. The drinks kept coming. She ordered another cocktail, then another, barely touching her food. The server glanced at me, hesitant, but still set them down. Her hands shook as she lifted the glass, spilling half of it on the table, but she didn't care. Her friends at the bar cheered, raising their own glasses, still recording. It wasn't just embarrassing, it was humiliating. I was trapped, caught between her drunken laughter and the steady gaze of her friends' phones. I felt like an animal in a cage, performing for strangers who couldn't wait to share the footage later. Halfway through the night, she stood up suddenly, almost knocking the table over. She swayed, giggled, then announced she was going to the bathroom. Her words were so slurred, half the room turned to look. She stumbled away, leaving me alone at the table, her unfinished food and spilled drinks spread out like a crime scene. That's when her friends made their move. They stood, phone still in hand, and walked closer. Not all the way to the table, just close enough that I could hear their laughter, see their smirks. One of the girls raised her phone higher, making sure she got me in the frame. The guy whispered something to the others, and they all cracked up. My hands clenched under the table. My heart hammered. I didn't know if I should confront them, if I should just walk out, or if leaving would make it worse. Every option felt like a trap. Minutes dragged by. She finally staggered back, dropping into her chair like nothing had happened, and slurred that her friends thought I was cute. They laughed louder at that, one of them nearly choking on her drink. I couldn't take it anymore. I dropped some cash on the table for my half, stood up, and muttered that I had to go, She pouted and tried to grab my arm, but missed. Her friends laughed even louder, phones up, recording every second. I walked fast toward the door, heat burning in my chest, eyes fixed on the exit. Behind me, I heard her shout my name, slurred and mocking, followed by another wave of laughter from across the bar. The night air hit me like a wall, sharp and cold, but it didn't help. My stomach churned as I ordered a ride, standing on the sidewalk with the glow of the bar's neon sign buzzing above me. I kept glancing at the door, half expecting her friends to come out, still recording, still laughing. They didn't. My ride pulled up and I climbed in, shaking. The driver asked if I was okay, but I couldn't answer. My throat felt locked. At home, I checked my phone, half dreading what I'd see. No messages from her, no notifications, but when I opened social media, I froze. There it was. A blurry video of me sitting stiffly at the table, her laughing in my face, her friends' voices cracking up behind the camera. Already shared, already spreading. And that's how I realized the whole night had never been about me. It was just a dare, a joke, a story for them to tell with me stuck in the middle as the punchline. It was supposed to be one drink, that's all. The date had been all right, nothing mind-blowing, nothing terrible. Dinner, a couple laughs, awkward silences here and there. When the check came, I figured we'd go our separate ways and maybe text later. But as we walked outside, he asked if I wanted to come back to his place for a quick drink. Just one. I hesitated, then agreed. I don't even know why. Maybe because it didn't feel dangerous in that moment. Maybe because he sounded casual about it. The ride there was quiet. He filled with the radio while I stared out the window, wondering if I'd regret saying yes. His place was a small ground floor apartment on a side street I'd never been down before. He unlocked the door fast, waved me in, and I stepped into a dimly lit living room that smelled faintly of cleaning supplies and something metallic. It looked normal enough. Couch, TV, shelves lined with random books and knickknacks. Nothing out of place. He tossed a jacket onto a chair and went straight to the kitchen, telling me to sit wherever. I lowered myself onto the couch, scanning the room. He came back with 2 glasses of wine, handed me one, and sat close. Too close. I forced a smile, sipped politely, and tried to relax. For a few minutes, it felt fine. We talked about work, movies, little things. I let myself believe maybe it really was just going to be one drink. Then I glanced at the clock. Almost midnight. My stomach tightened. I set my glass down, grabbed my bag, and said I should head out. That's when I noticed. The door. The handle didn't have a lock on the inside. No deadbolt, no latch, just a plain knob. My pulse quickened. I walked over, casually at first, hand reaching for it. I twisted. Nothing. The knob spun but didn't catch. The door stayed shut. I tried again, harder this time. Still nothing. I glanced back at him. He was watching me from the couch, wine glass in hand, expression calm. He didn't move, didn't ask what I was doing. Just sat there, eyes locked on me, waiting. I asked if the door was stuck. He smiled faintly and said nothing. My chest tightened. I crouched, scanning the base of the door, looking for a keyhole. Nothing. I checked the frame. Smooth, clean, no bolt, no chain. Just a locked door with no visible way to unlock it. My throat went dry. I muttered something about leaving, hoping he'd stand and help. But he didn't move. He swirled his drink, eyes never leaving me. The room felt smaller by the second. The hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen grew louder, filling the silence. My hands shook as I tried the knob again, twisting until my wrist ached. Still locked. Finally, I turned back to him. He tilted his head, smiling slightly, and said I hadn't even finished my drink. The words hit me like ice. I forced a laugh, pretending to brush it off, but my heart hammered in my chest. I stepped away from the door, sat back down, and picked up my glass with trembling hands. I sipped slowly, eyes darting around the room, looking for another exit. A window, a back door, anything. The blinds were drawn tight, heavy fabric that blocked the view. The hallway to the back was dark, shadows swallowing everything beyond the doorway. He kept talking, casual, like nothing was wrong. He asked me questions, told stories, laughed at his own jokes. I nodded along, pretending to listen, but my mind raced. Every few minutes, I glanced at the door. The smooth knob glinted under the lamplight, mocking me. I thought about bolting for the window, but the curtains looked too thick, and he was too close. Minutes dragged like hours. I kept sipping, forcing my hands not to shake. Finally, I set the glass down again and stood. I said I really had to go, voice steadier than I felt. This time, he stood too. Slowly, calmly. He walked over, stopped a few feet from the door, and reached into his pocket. My heart dropped. He pulled out a small key. He held it up, dangling from his fingers, smirking like he'd been waiting for this moment all along. Then, without breaking eye contact, he slipped it back into his pocket. My stomach twisted. I froze, unsure whether to scream, to beg, to run. He laughed softly, shaking his head, and finally walked to the door. He slid the key into a nearly invisible slot at the base of the knob, twisted, and the lock clicked. He opened the door wide, the night air spilling in. He gestured for me to go, smile never fading. I grabbed my bag, heart racing, and stepped outside without looking back. The door shut behind me with a heavy thud. I didn't stop walking until I reached the main street, lights and traffic pulling me back into reality. I ordered a ride with shaking hands, staring at the empty sidewalk behind me until the car pulled up. At home, I sat on my bed, still trembling. I kept replaying the way he dangled the key, the way he smiled while I panicked, the way he finally let me out like it was all a game. The dinner itself was fine. Nothing fancy, just a small Thai spot with sticky tables and neon signs buzzing in the windows. She was funny enough, a little intense, but not in a way that set off alarms. We ate, we laughed at the drunk couple in the corner, and by the time the check came, I figured that was the end of the night. But then she leaned in and asked if I wanted to come back to her place, just for a drink, maybe to keep talking. I hesitated, but she smiled wide, and something in me thought, why not? Her apartment wasn't far, just a short walk down a quieter street lined with cracked pavement and flickering streetlights. The building itself was old, bricks faded, the hallway smelling faintly of mildew and cheap incense. She unlocked the door fast, swung it open, and ushered me inside. At first glance, the place looked normal. A couch with a couple of blankets thrown over it, shelves cluttered with books and random trinkets, a TV humming in the corner. She offered me a drink and disappeared into the kitchen, calling back over her shoulder for me to make myself comfortable. I sat on the couch, taking in the room. Something about it felt heavy. The blinds were drawn tight, no view of the outside. A single lamp lit the corner, casting long shadows across the walls. My chest tightened, but I brushed it off. Just an old apartment, nothing more. She came back with 2 glasses of wine, handed me one, and plopped down beside me. Too close. We talked for a while, sipping, the conversation looping back to random stories about her neighbors, her job, things she hated about the city. Her laugh was loud, sharp, echoing in the small space. But after a while, I glanced at the clock on the wall. Past midnight. My stomach churned. I set my glass down, grabbed my jacket, and told her I should head out. That's when everything changed. As I stood, she moved faster than I expected. She slid off the couch, stepped in front of the door, and planted herself there. Her face shifted, the smile gone, her eyes flat. She leaned back against the doorframe, arms crossed, and said it. No one leaves until she's finished with them. The words hit me like a punch. My chest tightened, my throat went dry. I laughed nervously at first, thinking maybe she was joking, but her face didn't change. She just stared at me, eyes locked, daring me to try. The silence stretched. My heart pounded so loud I was sure she could hear it. I forced a smile, muttered something about being tired, but she didn't move. Her arms stayed folded, her back pressed against the only way out. I glanced around the room, searching for another exit. Nothing. No back door, no window big enough to squeeze through. Just her, standing calm and steady, blocking me. My palms sweated. I sat back down slowly, pretending to relax, pretending I wasn't panicking inside. She smirked, uncrossed her arms, and walked back toward the couch, but she didn't unlock the door. She didn't even touch it. She just sat across from me now, sipping her wine, eyes never leaving mine. The air felt thick. Every second stretched too long. I nodded along to her words, whatever she was saying, but I barely heard them. My focus stayed on the door, the knob, the way she lingered close to it like a guard. I tried to play along. I asked questions, laughed at the right times. Anything to keep her calm. But inside, my brain raced with plans. Could I push past her? Grab the knob fast enough? Yell for help in the hallway? Every option felt dangerous. At one point, she leaned in close, so close I could smell the wine on her breath, and whispered something I'll never forget. She said she liked keeping people a little longer. Said it gave her time to figure out if they were worth it. Then she leaned back, eyes glinting like she was enjoying every flicker of fear in my expression. I forced myself to finish the wine in my glass, my hands shaking so hard the liquid almost spilled. I set it down, smiled, and said I really needed to go. This time I stood slower, less abrupt, inching toward the door like I wasn't desperate. She stood too, calm, deliberate. She leaned against the door again, eyes locked on me. I swallowed hard, forcing words out, asking her politely to move. For a moment she just stared. Then finally she reached behind her, twisted the lock, and swung the door open. The hallway light spilled in, bright and almost blinding after the dimness of her apartment. She tilted her head, smiling faintly now, and stepped aside. I didn't wait. I grabbed my jacket, muttered something about texting later, and slipped out fast. The door shut behind me with a heavy thud, the lock clicking loud in the hallway. I didn't stop walking until I was outside, the night air sharp and cold against my skin. My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone, ordered a ride, and stood under the streetlight, glancing back at the building every few seconds. No blinds shifted, no door opened, nothing moved. The car pulled up, and I climbed in, heart still hammering. As we drove away, I stared at the dark windows of her apartment, wondering how many times she'd said those words before. No one leaves until she's finished with them. And the part that keeps me up even now, she never said what finish meant.